if afterwards it doesn't work anymore? If you had 1 week left to live, what would you do? I am a very curious person. I ask so many questions that, as a result, in math class, my teacher makes me think about the importance of my questions for 30 seconds before I'm allowed to ask them. In biology, I was allowed only 3 questions per class. My government class, by unanimous vote, decided to host a national Alphonse Mshomba, that's me, Can't Ask Questions Day. And my school newspaper's even writing an article about me and my questions entitled, "Wait, what?" It's safe to say that I ask more questions than any other person at my school. And that I take a lot of flack for that. But what's wrong with asking questions? I mean, I would say nothing. The problem is that too many people would disagree because they don't ask questions and don't appreciate it when others do. Have you ever noticed how many questions little kids ask? Why do we stop asking questions? What are the effects? And what are some ways to help foster our curiosity? So, what do I mean when I say we don't ask enough questions? Well, let's start off with the most notorious example. Men who would prefer to drive aimlessly around the countryside than ask for directions. Actually, though, men get a bad rap here, because according to a 2005 AAA survey, while men ask for directions when lost only 34% of the time, women ask only 37% of the time. And of course, everyone who has ever been to school knows that when the teacher asks, "Any questions?" the reaction of the class is typically silence, despite the fact that there are usually many questions out there. And then there's the fact that a survey conducted by UCLA on communication between doctors and their patients found that when prescribing medication, doctors on average explained only 3.1 of the 5 necessary instructions, and in other cases explained significant side effects only 35% of the time. Now, it's easy to blame doctors for this, but we as patients are also at fault. A simple question about these things could save a lot of trouble later on. The next question is, why don't we ask the questions we should? And the all too familiar reason is fear. As internationally recognized child psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Perry states, we are told from a young age, don't touch, don't take that apart, don't get dirty, don't. However, when we are children, these are the ways through which we explore our world and satisfy our curiosity. When parents show their disapproval, well, some children clam up and lose out. And this process continues when we get to school. Although education is supposed to awaken curiosity, more often it seems to stifle it. Many schools' approach is to pry open the skull, cram stuff in, and voila, a genius is born, right? Wrong. As How Stuff Works founder Marshall Brain puts it, in 10 or 20 years, much of what I teach today will be obsolete. Facts and techniques are not the main thrust of education. So, what is? Getting kids to think, to question, and to answer is. But all too often, the people posing the questions are perceived as empty-headed. And that's just sad. But this perception also permeates the workplace. In her article, Don't Be Afraid to Ask, Business Week columnist Liz Ryan suggests that many employees are taught to just follow protocol. Because if you waste our time with questions, we'll lose time and money, but you'll lose your job. Yet the most dramatic scientific discoveries have been made by those who've taken the time and had the courage to ask the inconvenient questions. And 2 scientists who come to mind are Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein. And although you may say, They don't count. They're natural geniuses. Well, normal people with courage can ask big questions too. And as I've noted, one of the areas where we don't ask enough questions is healthcare. Simple questions like, does this medication have any side effects? Is there anything I should avoid while taking this? Is this operation really necessary? Is there anything else we could try? These and so many more potentially important questions too often go unasked. I have experience with this because of something that happened in my own family a few years ago. You see, my brother and I were each born with benign neonatal sleep myoclonus. In English, that means that for the first year or so of our lives, we would have seizures when falling asleep. Now, when my youngest brother was born, after all the testing, the doctors, thinking he had epilepsy, wanted to put him on medication immediately. Medication likely to impair his mental development. My parents questioned this recommendation, believing it was the same benign condition my brother and I had. They decided to sign my brother out of the hospital against medical advice, to seek more answers to their questions. 3 weeks later, a specialist at a children's hospital concluded that my parents were right. Thinking back, I can only imagine what my life, what my parents' life, and most importantly, what my brother's life would be like if my parents hadn't questioned those first doctors. Okay, even I understand that not all questions are created equal. For example, what time is the midnight mass? Do vegetarians eat animal crackers? If 4 out of 5 people suffer from diarrhea, does that mean that the 5th one enjoys it? The questions I encourage are those that further our understanding of our world, society, and selves. They may not be convenient. They may be uncomfortable. Sometimes they may not even be answerable. But if they provide important information, they must be asked. So, let me put into words the question that at this point, you should probably all be asking. What do we do about this? Well, 2 things. First, we need to get over our shyness about asking questions. If you don't understand something, ask. If you need more information, ask. Second, we need to encourage and teach others. Our parents, children, brothers, sisters, classmates, coworkers, and friends to do so also. In fact, right now, asking questions may be one of the most important and patriotic things we can do, because no one can contribute to the well-being of his or her family, friends, and nation without knowing and understanding what is going on. And so we must ask questions so that we understand what's going on with the economy, what our government is doing, how our money is being spent, how the most precious resources of our people's lives are being used, and how, together, we can work to make this a better, safer, and cleaner world for our generation and future generations. And so I urge you to keep an open mind. Don't take things for granted. And ask questions relentlessly. Many times when people hear my name, Alphonse Mshomba, they wonder about my background. But they don't ask because they don't want to pry, and they just wonder. But let me answer some of your unasked questions. My mother is a white woman from the Midwest. My father is a black economist from East Africa. But I promise you, I don't plan on running for president Anytime soon. See? That wasn't so bad. All you had to do was ask. As the late American businessman Bernard Baruch once said, millions saw the apple fall, but Newton asked why. And as the ever-so-curious Alphonse Mshomba likes to say, millions saw the Tootsie Pop commercials and wondered, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a